It's disorganized play. Disorganized play. It's time to talk about Dungeons and Dragons today. Hi everyone. Hello, welcome. Sorry the stream is a little late. I had some things I had to take care of this morning. Yes, my $10 Amazon tripod is paying off. So, hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome back from Gen Con. Thomas W.D. Young, thank you for being subscribed for 2 months in a row. Let's see if you can beat James V. or whatever. Thank you so much for the congrats on the gig. I'm doing a show for... I did an episode for a show on Nickelodeon, so that was fun. It was... I'm getting some dropped frames here, so bear with me. I missed you all at Gen Con. Although, it was going to be my 33rd consecutive year, I do feel like I missed momentous occasion, Gen Con 50. I wish I could have seen the museum. That looked cool. Nazcraig sounded like it went off great this year, and I've been involved in that, either as a player or as someone hosting, running it for basically my whole Gen Con career. So I'm glad that that went off without too many issues. Not that I'm essential to the running of Nazcraig by any means, but it was a last minute decision, a last minute complication that came up, and it cost me $500, but there we are. So there we go. We could talk briefly about Gen Con. The agenda today, finding the path. So we have been off for a number of weeks. We've been off for 2 weeks. And it's time to kind of circle back around, pick up the pieces that have been dropped by the way, and figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do tomorrow night? So hopefully that's one thing that we will puzzle out together. But I don't have a very formalized agenda. Honestly, I had a very busy morning this morning and a busy few days the past couple days. So I saw Amy as the Sleeping Mermaid. Yes, that was adorable. Gen Con did look super fun. The good news for me is I got most of the stuff that I wanted to get. Dom picked it up, or our friends picked it up for me. I got a copy of Tales from the Loop, and I got a copy of Starfinder. And as we talked about right before Gen Con, that was the big thing on... Those were the two big games on my list. Although, as I said to my wife, I'm sure I saved us a bunch of money by not going and just relentlessly shopping the exhibit hall, because I'm sure I would have spent more cash on other things as they passed by my finely honed palate and were inhaled into my nerdly sensory organs. So that's the thing. Yes, Scott, I'm sorry you did not win in any, but there you go. It's the Ennies are... The Ennies are tricky because they are solely a popularity contest, and it is a matter of how hard you marshal and whip your fan base and how hard they marshal and whip their friends, and just sort of inherently how many people have your particular product on their radar. So whether it's better than someone else's product is not the question. It's really a question of marketing. The only other thing I will say along those lines is I feel like the Ennies are in danger of being brigaded if they have not already been brigaded, and if they want to continue their relevance as an industry yardstick of success and fan appreciation, then I think it would behoove them to head off at the pass a Gamergate or, world fantasy, sci-fi. You know, we've seen this rabid puppy, sick puppy stuff happen in the world of sci-fi and fantasy literature. I think if we haven't crossed that bridge already, I think it would behoove them to try and take some measures which would prevent that sort of scenario from arising. And I agree with Jordan or DJ Regular that the categories have accumulated a certain clunkiness to them. You know, like for a while there, like it was a new thing to have a blog or a website about D&D, and so there's like a category of best blog. I mean, that seems irrelevant. And then there's issues where they wanted to give somebody an award for best monster book, but then somebody said, well, why don't we have an award for best supplement? And now there's awards for best supplement and best monster book. What does that mean? I don't. Why do you have ones? You know, so I think it would behoove them to take some steps to make sure that voting can't be brigaded, and secondly, to take an opportunity to step back and pare down the sheer number of categories that they have. The ceremony went fairly well. I watched it on the stream, which the audio was not good. But you know, it went fairly quick. I thought you know, the presenter did a good job and keeping it moving, and I'm glad that they just do the gold and the silver, and it keeps things humming along. And it's interesting to see what people wear. I feel like apparently we may have kind of like lost some of that nerds get dressed up for this. So it's an interesting transition that it's going through, but I think that Ennies are due for some revision before they become a victim of the artifacts that have accumulated to them over the years. That's all I really am prepared to say about that at this point. I do enjoy. Do I enjoy attending the Ennies? It's a great way to meet different developers and different people from the industry. So I do like I enjoy that aspect of it. It is interesting to see who marshals what, and the downside is occasionally you get some shitlords who walk across the stage. All right. So other than that, I thought I mean it sounded like Gen Con was amazing, and in terms of how huge it was, I thought it was really well, it seemed to be well handled. I don't know what the food situation was in terms of getting food and that sort of stuff, etc. But it seemed like everything kind of ran without a hitch. All of my Nazcraig friends were like, other than the fact that we're on the edge of the convention, we're doing great. So that means they couldn't like pick up players who might just be wandering by, because nobody really is just wandering by Lucas Oil Stadium. But other than that, they were like, the atmosphere over here is a lot better. It's just a better environment to run games in. You know, we had been kind of crammed into this exhibit hall that was super noisy. It was a bunch of board gamers who did not want to have anything to do with RPG games. It was kind of a tough situation to marshal in and whatnot. So it sounds like it went better this year. I was, you know, sad to miss it, but it turned out I got the things that I wanted, the games that I wanted. I'm excited to check out Tales from the Loop. I kind of didn't back that one on Kickstarter because I wasn't sure about the rules. I sort of regret that, but, you know, I got my copy, so that's what matters. And I got a copy of Starfinder. We'll maybe talk about that a little bit on Thursday. We'll see how that goes. But, you know, I think the ironic thing was 30 minutes after I had said, well, it looks like I'm going to Gen Con. You know, there's this thing kind of hanging out there, but I might not go. 30 minutes after I said that, my phone rang. Guess what? You're booked on this job. So I find it ironic that at the top of that stream, the very first thing that I let off with was, it's okay to not go to Gen Con. So there we go. What I got a copy of Tales from the Loop, Christian Linky, so thank you. What do I think about Invisible Sun? I have I've backed that, and I have not been paying a ton of attention to it since then. I'm waiting. I will say I saw that picture of Sean all dressed up in his finery with the complete box in front of him, and I'm like, if that's coming to my house, I might have to just take a day off because that box is an extraordinary set of components, kind of like just amazingly. The presentation looks amazing, so that's that looks fascinating to me. I'm curious. There's they're going for a very, Monty's going for a very specific tone with that game, and I applaud him for kind of like taking the game in that direction, because it's got a it's got a definitive perspective to it. Now, if it seems a little too kind of like, let's cross the X Files with church or something like that, well, if that's not for you, that's not for you. But I think it was very clear going into the Kickstarter that it was going to be that style of game with very heavy symbolic references and an obtuse, kind of opaque entry into what the game experience was going to be like. If you didn't know that going into it, that's I could see how that might not. You might be like, "What is going on with this game?" But that was fairly clear to me from backing it and reading the materials and things like that. Uh, and I'll admit, I backed it as to some degree as an article of faith that Monty Cook Games is going to put together something interesting, compelling, and beautifully presented. I got Tales from the Jade Colossus on the pre-order, thank God, because I couldn't make it to Gen Con and pick it up like I was planning to. And it was interesting that the one thing that strikes me is that they always have they have interesting ideas, and they always have amazing presentation. So, whether you enjoy the cipher system or not is kind of a matter of how much you've played it and whether it hooks into the things that you get hooked into. I like it, but there's no question that they put out a top-notch product. So you're not getting corners cut on anything that Monty Cook Games produces. Again, my whole first step into connecting with people in the industry was reaching out to Monty and becoming a moderator for him on his old Malhavik Press forums. And from there, that's how I really developed a network of contacts in the industry. So if anybody's expecting me to come and, badmouth Monty stuff, they're in the wrong place. So that's the deal. Jordan says, I really want to play it so that if it shows up, and I'm looking for players. So I know that David Crennan also wants to play it, and I think he backed it. He was like, oh, I want to back at the super level where kind of like Monty provides you with materials for a guided campaign throughout an entire year. I backed it at whatever the base game was of like $250 or whatever it was. That was my decision. But I think I think David Crennan also wants to either run or play. So maybe between the three of us, we can get a few more people together and do an actual play on the stream. So, Griffin of H, thanks for subbing back up with with the real money. Thank you so much. You get your resub. Remember, you get a reroll tomorrow. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I mean, it's always, every Kickstarter for me at this point is getting to what I'm going to play versus what I can afford to pay. And I look at my crowded shelf space and go, well, when am I going to get around to that? When am I going to get around to that? And sometimes I'll fully admit, like, I will back games because I think it's interesting source material to read. I will back games because I'm looking for their angle on game mechanics and the play experience. And sometimes I will back games because I want to help develop this person's career as a designer or what have you. And regardless of what I think the final outcome is going to be, I want to encourage them in their career and help them develop new ideas and get products off the ground and encourage them to go further. You know, we're way off the beaten path here, but when you talk about this industry having an issue of being just white guys in their 40s cranking out fantasy products, some of that is a self-perpetuating circle where minorities, people of color, different orientation, what have you, don't feel like they have any mentorship or don't have an in the industry, and they get discouraged, and so they never kind of have that apprentice journeyman type of experience that gets into the place where they can launch their own titles or sustain their uh, own company or label or imprint or whatever. So if I can help support new voices coming into our hobby and changing gaming by making a modest contribution of 25, 35, 45 bucks, sometimes I will pull the trigger on that thing. I generally on my Twitter feed, I generally don't promote anything that uh, I have not backed, or where I don't know who it is who's backing it. Sometimes I'll say stuff like, "Well, this looks interesting," but a lot of the times, if I tweet about a project, I would say 80 to 90% of the time I've backed it. I don't want to just have my Twitter. I know I tweet a lot of Kickstarters and things of that nature, crowdfunding things, and I don't want my channel, I don't want that platform to just be here's Kickstarters and stuff like that. But I also want to sort of stand behind the things that I promote, saying, well, I'm invested in it. If you're not, that's fine. But I'm not just wildly like punching promote. Yeah. So, what are we talking about? Why are we talking about minorities? What's going on? Yes. So, well, we just been talking about different creators and things like that, uh, and how the rise of crowdfunding has enabled us as an industry to help develop a pipeline for voices who have not traditionally been heard in the tabletop games community to come forward and find their way to success and help fund their success. That's what we're talking about. So, yeah, Sean looked amazing. I didn't get enough pictures of cosplay at the con, I will say that. All right. So I started late. It's 2:30. Gen Con looked amazing. Just to put a bow on this whole conversation, I feel like I'm getting to the point in my regular career as an actor that it may be difficult for me to commit to going to Gen Con for all 4 days, if at all. And who knows? I mean, Gamehole Con is starting to kind of like pull into that same twilight zone of like November's a really busy time. It's a little bit easier there because they have me there as a guest of honor. So if airfare has to move, I'm not the one who's out the airfare. Like I had to eat I had to eat $500 this weekend, and that's not an easy thing to do. So if my career starts to pick up and I get consistent work, then Gen Con will probably have to kind of go by the wayside. So, thanks, Jordan. We'll see you soon. All right. So, today's topics, we're going to go back to White Plume Mountain. Just a recap for everybody who may or may not have been tuned in. Last week, we just had a Gen Con preview. There was no session. Everybody was traveling to Gen Con. The week before, Havana ran her one-off session. And we had a Disorganized Play recap about that with Havana and what it was like for her to run her first time DMing. I thought that was interesting and instructional. That was a fun experience. I think... I'm not sure. I'm doing some maintenance in the building again, so that's always fun. Sorry. Yeah, that session was super fun, and I thought she did a fantastic job. And I think we've covered that clearly. And as I said on the stream, I wouldn't have put her in that position if I didn't think she could put together an entertaining session. So she did a terrific job with it. She did great prep. She ran the game smoothly. It was interesting how it went from kind of this like, "Hey kids, you're out summer camp," to her face is mashed in with some blunt force object and it forms this concave bowl of blood and bone and whatnot. Like it really took. It really took a swing in tone there, but that's okay. It turned back around into goofy fun. Thank you, Randy. Welcome to the stream today. Now, the only other thing I will say about picking up off of Havana's one shot, which was a kind of like a not a prequel, but sort of a different type of prequel, right? So we played Session 0, and this fits in somewhere. Actually, this fit in before that, so it was a prequel to the prequel, right? We went even earlier on that. That was fine. I thought that was fun. The only idea spinning off of that session that I feel like there's something there that I could kind of pick away and carry forward into our ongoing campaign is the whole idea of doppelgangers got introduced here. And specifically, Grayson got duped as a doppelganger. I think there's an opportunity to pick up that doppelganger theme and either reincorporate it into the session now, or to do a callback to it where, maybe it turns out that they got the wrong one and that Grayson actually is currently a doppelganger or what have you. That sort of stuff is tricky. I will say if I go that route, I have to talk to Eric about it. That's really intruding on his character concept in a way that's not acceptable. But if I can keep it between him and me and nobody in chat spills the beans, it could be an awesome reveal down the road with the rest of the party that they wouldn't see coming. So I think that's an idea that's ripe with potential, right? There's a ping, there's a spark on our plot radar that has the potential to create a Schrodinger's clue. I know you guys are horrible secrets, and I almost did not want to bring it up, but I'm telling you this because the success of this idea relies 100% upon you guys being able to keep a secret. So if you want to ruin it for yourselves, that's fine. But I will say, if I get any idea that somebody else in the group has been tipped off, I'll probably just trash the whole thing because it won't be worth it. So that's something to think about. I'm giving it over to you, chat. I'm not so wedded to the idea that I need to make it happen. Otherwise, I probably would have just kept it to myself. But if you guys think that this would be a really cool reveal, and Eric signs off on it, then I think there's some interesting possibilities there. That's all I've got for that. All right, so the rest of White Plume Mountain. Let's talk about where we're at. The last session that we had, we left off with the wishes being deployed by the weird vampire lord guy that they never actually even saw. It was a body in the darkness that dissolved into gas, apparently granted them wishes, fed on 2 of the party members. Very dramatic, very climactic session. I thought we got into some real interesting territory. So the 2 wishes that were spent were Gaurav's character wished for his father to come back. So there's some interesting things around that, is that he just wished for him to come back. There was not any more specificity attached to that. That gives us some leeway to dick around with that idea. The second thing is that Amy's character wished to be free of the voices. Now, this is another situation where I feel like I need to talk to Amy about, as in a sideboard conversation outside of play, about where she feels like her character is going, what she thinks is going to happen with that. Ultimately, it's one of those deals where I'm trying to balance the fact that she's a mystic with the idea that this was pitched to her, that this was a better variation than playing a warlock. So she liked the warlock patronage idea, but I do think, as I've said in previous streams, that the voices are causing too much intra-party friction. It's making her seem like someone who's untrustworthy, and it's making the other characters question her sanity and the wisdom of her actions. So, BSB Care says Thawne's dad comes back, but his mom dies from the shock of seeing her husband come back to life. That's interesting. Thomas W.D. Young says zombie dad. Also interesting. So those are some good ideas. I don't think we're going to get to those ideas until they decide to exit the White Plume Mountain portion of the Iron Keep. And I think we're probably 2 sessions away from that. I don't know that they're going to want to long rest or what have you. It's unclear. I kind of have to go back and watch the stream because I don't remember whether they long rested or not. It's part of the whole issue here is that it's been now 2 weeks, and there's a lot of stuff that has happened since the last session. So we're kind of dealing with that, like, wiping the slate clean and then trying to get the lens out and refocusing. Randy says, I say that the dad comes back as a younger version of himself, perhaps as a kid, and now the roles are reversed. That's very interesting. Yeah, I don't remember whether Thawne was adamant about heading home right then and there, but yeah, BSB Care and DJ Regular are talking about the doppelganger idea, and that maybe they're not inherently malicious. And I would agree that, like, the most obvious card to play would be, Thawne suddenly turns on everyone. But I don't think that really is fun because it's so predictable, it's not interesting. And also, it really goes against, like, why did he decide to strike out at the party now? Why he could have had any number of chances to do it before. So the idea that there's maybe some sort of doppelganger society or secret group or cult or whatever it might be, but is not on its face malevolent, is more interesting. And I think that's a cool way that could come into play. Griffin suggests make Amy free from her voices and certain of her key abilities, and perhaps offer her a quest or two to get her powers back, but also another quest to make their interactions ultimately controllable. Yeah, I don't want to deprive her of powers, because I think one, that's a punishment for the player that they don't really deserve, and number two, I think that only reinforces the idea that I have to have these voices in order to be the adventuring badass that I seek to be. Whereas my intent with freeing her from the voices is that she can be the full potential of her character class without having to side on the side of the voices, right? So I don't want to punish her in that way. I think there can be unintended consequences from those voices being freed, but I'm not sure what they are. All right, so let's talk about the 2 paths that are left. One path is sort of labeled as the vault of what exactly was her name again? I'm terrible with names. BSB Care says the voices are going to be tricky. Do they go to someone else and try to get back at her for Amy getting rid of them, or are the voices just completely gone forever? So I think there's a third alternative there, which is not as malicious as either of those things. I think the voices are free of Amy. She still has her power. They might not be vindictive, but they can go out into the world and do other things. So now that they're free of her, they can go off and seek their own fortune and follow their own set of goals. It's Hargat Axbinder. Yes, thank you, Thomas. It's Hargat Axbinder. So we have the two vaults. One is named after Hargat Axbinder, and the other one is after their kid. I have to go look at what that name is too. And the only things that we know is that Hargat obviously has become sort of this weird demigod kind of spirit overlord, fate bender type of person or entity. So they're not really of this material world. And then the child, there's really nothing known about them. It's sort of this lost kind of blank canvas type of thing. So I think we need to make some... The main issue that we're facing here is we're not sure which way they're going to go. There's three real strong possibilities. They could leave the dungeon, as is Thawne's intent, potentially, and go back to town and see how these wishes have turned out. Are they really under any time pressure to stay in the dungeon? No, I guess not. So that's an important avenue to consider. They could go to Hargat Axbinder's vault down that path and discover what's down there. And I have to look at the book because I think that is the branch of the adventure that leads to kind of the bubbling cauldron with all the super hot steaming water around it and the giant crab fight. So that could turn into more of a combat-y kind of encounter. If they go that way, then I think it's important to make a decision about, okay, well, what is Hargat's legacy here? What has Hargat left behind? Or what is the purpose of this vault? Is there, like in the last one, apparently some sort of coffin or something? That would be interesting. Or is there something imprisoned here that would create an interesting opportunity to role play with the party? Now, we've already offered them wishes. Is there something else that we could offer the party? Whether that's an offer that's coming from Hargat, like would they encounter her specifically? I don't think that that's appropriate at this time. But we could have some servitor of Hargat's who's been left behind. Now, what does that mean? Could it be a guardian of her remains, or somebody who is there to look over like a type of phylactery, or maybe the materials that she used to ascend to this demigod status, or whatever it is? That's one thing. So you could have this servitor creature, and then how does that manifest itself, and what sort of powers does it have? Is it a corporeal being? Is it a spirit? What is it? That's an encounter that I think needs to be injected into that path, because that path really is very combat heavy and not much else, right? So that's going on. That's that path. And then the third and final option that we really need to strongly consider is that they go to the third vault, which is the vault of Harget and Barged's child. Who's that character, and what is that character about? How is that person alive, dead? Did it go off somewhere and do some go on to someplace else that sort of disappeared off of the timeline of the Forgotten Realms. You know, I think if we step back on a larger scale, I'm looking at making the Iron Keep to not be a hub of interdimensional travel, but to be one of the spokes on a greater wheel. So it's connected to a bunch of different places, but it's not like the central where like a bunch of different. It's not like the city of Sigil. It's like if you think of the cosmology of the Great Wheel, where there's all of these planes. That's not a good example. Think of it more like being a town on the map that's connected to a bunch of other places. Like if you're to look at it as like railroad lines, yeah, a bunch of them connect here, but it's not Chicago. Not everything converges on that place. So it does have a little bit of a planescape or a beyond countless doorways type of vibe to it. Clearly, this particular part of the Iron Keep does not, right? And I think some lore that we can introduce here is that Hargat Axbinder was the most recent lord of the Iron Keep, and that the Iron Keep has sort of been in decline, and she shut it down. She was the last lord of the keep and decided, I'm not going to pass the burden of being a lord or pass this power on. I'm not going to pass it on to my child. I'm not going to pass it on to a stranger. Therefore, the keys to the Iron Keep will largely be buried with me. And if someone worthy comes along, then they can take stewardship of this fortress. So that's some of the backstory lore that's bubbling around in my head, right? Is how can we make this how can we explain how active this place was at one time in history and how connected it was to all these different worlds, but demonstrate like, oh, here's why it's kind of like dried up and abandoned and nobody's there. So yeah, so BSB Care makes the point that the steward who is in Hargat's crypt might be the one who determines like whether you are judged worthy or not of assuming ownership of the keep. It's a very tricky thing because I don't want to tie this to a specific set of characters. And part of that is like, let's just say, take a real life example of Amy books a job, or anybody on that cast books a job where they're going to be busy for 3 months. Well, if the power of the Iron Keep is invested in their character and it's not something that's transferable, then I got to start do some loop-de-loops. Like, well, she's not here, but the substitute player who comes in somehow is grandfathered in or whatever it is, right? So that's a little weird. So I don't know that there's a test of worthiness. I think it's more like a case of discovering lore. Or perhaps performing a ritual that could then be repeated. Like learning a ritual that you could then repeat. Kind of like opening the door. We had in our first session of White Blue Mountain where they opened the door to the Iron Keep. Well, it's not that portal wasn't there. It was that you didn't know how to access it and you had to have the dragon key in order to do it. So it's a matter of discovering knowledge, not being imbued with magical MacGuffin power that makes you the stewards of the keep. I think it's something that you have to kind of claim for yourself. So, yeah, I mean, could it be the group is worthy? The issue I have with that suggestion is that then means that the previous lords of the Iron Keep all had to either be part of a group that was worthy, which is an interesting idea for some of them, or somehow have a superset of powers that made them better than a collection of characters. you can explain your way around that. I think you're just imposing a restriction that you're going to more often than not end up kind of fighting versus there must be a simpler way to get there, right? I'm not sure. Yeah, so S. Del Castillo brings up a valid point, which is Havana is out of town. She went to visit her family down south, which 100% understand. We're trying to line up a sub for tomorrow. I don't know that we have that person at this point. I haven't heard from Dom. I know he was going to put some feelers out, but we'll see what they end up doing. I don't have any notifications on my phone from him at this point. Yeah, the axe binders were worthy until Daddy Dearest became a vampire. Mm-hmm. I mean, so that brings up... So I think there's some opportunities there to inject something where we can learn more about the lore. So that means we have to make some... We have to create some prompts for the lore. Even if we don't determine the full backstory, we need to create some discoverables around the Iron Keep. I think there's a very clever... there's a clever possibility here that when Hargat retreated to this vault and locked herself in and ascended to become whatever spirit she became, she took other keys to the Iron Keep with her. Like, the party kind of stumbled upon this matched pair of lockets, and they kind of stumbled on the dragon key. And it's a happy coincidence that those things came together to allow them entrance to the Iron Keep. But what if... Again, I'm giving away my secrets. You guys have to be... You have to be your own wardens of the adventure here, right? What if the artifacts that are in White Plume Mountain, Wave and Whelm and Black Razor, were in fact the physical keys to other different areas of the keep? So you could use Wave or Whelm to open another vault, another area of the Iron Keep, and then we propel our adventure forward, right? That has two nice effects to it. One is you can kind of take those items off the table in terms of loot. You have to stick the trident into the 3 keyholes and turn it so that they all turn simultaneously, and then it stays in there in order to grant access to that area or whatever it is. So you can't carry around this badass magical sword the entire adventure. Not that I want to deprive them of a badass magical sword, but Grayson probably isn't going to use a sword that drains the life force out of characters. And nobody else is really a sword slinger. It might be fascinating to have Tack come into possession of Black Razor, and Black Razor turns out to be her patron. I just thought of that just now, but that seems fascinating. But you can't, does she shed blood with it or not? Let's all chew over that one. Giving somebody a magical trident just doesn't seem like a big thrill. It also raises the issue of, if you want to access one of the other areas of the keep, you need to defeat or bargain with or free the vampire lord who's guarding that hammer. Griffin says the keys would then have the possibility of being destroyed, locking off a portion of the Iron Keep for eternity. Perhaps then we can have an entire different group, bad guys, etc., vying to do exactly that and destroy one or more of the keys. That's interesting. I'm always reluctant to take stuff away from the players in a way that seems malicious, right? I'm 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 hesitant to go, oh, now you just got this cool thing. Guess what? Everybody's going to try and steal it. Although that's a great adventure hook, right? You know, whenever somebody gets a great, you're carrying Black Razor. Well, you're never going to sleep again at night. There's way too many people who want that thing. BSB Care asks, how would Tack deal with hearing another voice after just getting rid of her regular voices? I don't know. That's interesting. All of this comes back to putting out feelers and having a out-of-game conversation with Amy about where do you want your character to go with these voices, recognizing the fact that it's causing friction between your character and the other characters in the party. Not between the players by any stretch of the imagination, but it feels like an arc of character development that has reached a plateau, and it either needs to go up or it needs to go down, but it needs to come to some sort of resolution. And right now there's the opportunity for it to kind of go down but create some interesting implications, whereas if it goes up, you run the risk of alienating everyone else in the group. So that's something to consider. Now, finally, we need to make some decisions about this child that they had. Is it a wayward child? Is it sort of a prodigal son? Was it was it a victim of Hargat's violence when he became a vampire? Is it just an unfortunate tragedy, and that was the first loss that they had as a couple, and then after that, maybe Bargad was driven to madness and sought means for immortality after having lost a child. He sought a way to prolong his own life so that he would never have to suffer that heartbreak of enduring another death or something like that. Those are all interesting questions. I think it's important to put some story prompts onto paper and figure out, okay, let's have some options at our beck and call, and then again, like Schrodinger's clues, bring those into focus. But it likes that. It likes that. It calls to mind the idea that, is there going to be a spirit in this area as well? Ultimately, if we back up and go, screw all of this plot stuff and all this campaign intrigue and backstory stuff that we're getting in the weeds on, right? Not that it's not important, but if we just set all of that aside for a moment, what we're analyzing here is we're analyzing White Plume Mountain as an adventure, which is very straightforward, very combat and puzzle oriented, and does not have a strong role-playing element. And the fundamental question that we're trying to address here is, if they take these two paths, how can we pursue an interesting role-playing encounter, or inject an interesting role-playing encounter into this very combat-heavy and puzzle-heavy scenario, right? I think we have the opportunity with Gulthias to make Gulthias this interesting big bad guy. I feel like Gulthias is emerging kind of literally from the shadows as this name that's been dropped over and over. It has a lot of importance to it. Clearly, the enemy NPCs that they encounter are either connected to or have a visceral response to that being. So I never planned on this being a vampire campaign, but it's very deliberately or very slowly marching toward, let's deal with Gulthias, this vampire, what a creature, whatever it is. And I think that's fine. I think, that that means down the road we can actually like introduce Heart of Nightfang Spire if we so chose. We could raid Curse of Strahd and actually adventure in Ravenloft. I don't think I would necessarily. I would certainly adapt Ravenloft, but let's think about this. So we know that there are 9 Lords of the Iron Keep. And we know from our cards that they all have a portfolio of things that they oversee for whatever reason. But what if Call into Shadow, if we consider the Iron Keep to be this dimensional hub, or at least a collection of dimensional portals that provide a launching place into other realms, then what if Gulthias was actually one of the Lords of the Iron Keep? Or one of the Lords of the Iron Keep became Gulthias, right? And then when you enter that realm of shadow, you actually enter like you are at the gates of Castle Ravenloft, or the hallway. Like we could use the whole map from Castle Ravenloft, right? So we could introduce that wholesale, that location straight up into the campaign. I think it would be very much in keeping with the feel and the intention of Castle Ravenloft to have them come and dine with Gulthias and kind of like wander around this place that's clearly overpowered for them, etc. It's a fascinating idea. I think the call into shadow, that bucket of things, tap the weave. I don't remember what the third one was. Like, it's clearly been too long since I've had lunch because I'm starting to run out of steam here. But that is a very powerful card. That is the one that offers the most potent hooks, and I don't want to just sort of like slap Ravenloft on there as like, let's save ourselves some time and put Ravenloft on there. On the other hand, I think it could be it's a very compelling fit. And within the idea of the fiction and what we've established so far, and the way that this whole Gulthias thing is developing, that could be an amazing experience. Very, very appropriate for where the campaign is headed right now. In that case, then maybe Black Razor does become, or maybe the Warhammer, maybe, is he called, there's Whelm, Wave. Whelm, I think, is the Warhammer, right? Wave is the Trident, and Whelm is the Warhammer. So maybe the Warhammer that's being guarded by Bargat, the Vampire Lord, that's the key to open the vault or the section of the keep that contains the call into shadow. Well, now all of a sudden, if they knew that, right? Hey, thanks for joining us, Randy. Have a good afternoon. Hope to see you tomorrow night. If they know that, they have a reason to go in there. Strong motivation to figure out a way to defeat this vampire. Maybe they have to do some adventuring or search out some quest things. So, I mean, it also makes sense. So maybe the backstory is that Hargat had to defeat her husband. Or he defeated her. Well, I don't know. One or the other. Anyway, in order to bind him to this place, contain him, she had to bury her warhammer in his crypt. Or, oh! What if she had to like stake him through the heart with her? Maybe that's the way that she defeated him, is she staked him through the heart with the haft of the warhammer, and so she had to give it up. She couldn't take it out. um, and that would they have to get that in order to get into the realm where the call into shadow is happening. BSB Care points out that we're forgetting a big element of why they're here that came to free Dell from the book. And I think that's true. I feel like that is... I feel like that's a precursory premise for them adventuring here. I feel like that thread of the adventure has fallen into the background. Like, yeah, we got to keep going, but as you point out earlier, there's no time crunch because Dell's finding the book. That's something that we could change, right? Maybe due to the heat or the humidity, the book starts taking on this moldering appearance. So we could introduce a time crunch element. You're right in that if we want that to become more urgent or more interesting or more compelling, so if we want that to become more interesting, more compelling, we need to bring it back into the foreground. I had an appointment run over this morning, and then I got a parking ticket. So I didn't get a chance to set up the second camera, and ideally what we should do is make a list of elements and fill out a new set of plot radar for our current events in White Plume Mountain, because there's a lot of possibilities going on where we are right now. There's a lot of juggling going on. There's a lot of elements that are up in the air, and then we need to like condense and rain down into some specific, like, definitive things. So I really need to kind of take that on as a task for myself in terms of, let's come up with our open-ended elements. What are the things that are on our plot radar that we can retire, and then how can we prepare some outcomes for them encountering that stuff and learning those secrets. So it's really about clues and discoverables, and it's not a one-to-one. A clue could have multiple discoverables until it actually is discovered, and then it becomes a clue that leads to other discoverables, right? I mean, I think that's the beauty of Schrodinger's clues and plot radar, is that one specific thing doesn't have a one-for-one relation to something else. It has a one-to-many relation until the moment when you actually like pin it down on something, and then boom, it now becomes the thing that has a one-to-many relation, and you can walk that spider web around your plot and come up with a cloud or a web of ideas that now connect together without having all that stuff planned out ahead of time. So yeah, I agree that like we need to make sure that we check back in, especially because Havana's character's not there. But we need to deal with a couple of specific things need to be addressed in tomorrow night's session. Amy's wish definitely needs to kind of have some points put on it. Thawne's wish may or may not need to. It depends upon whether they decide to leave the keep. I don't think those things are hard to deal with. But going forward from that, those things need to be dealt with. We need to fill in more of the backstory of the Iron Keep and inject those seed pods of clues, those Schrodinger's clues, need to be injected somewhere into a role-playing encounter or some sort of discoverable that they can get out of both of the branches that they could take. So those are the tasks immediately ahead, and then finally, the question remains: do we want to raise the stakes on solving Dell's conundrum? In my mind, these things. In my mind, the way that all of this is connected is that the ritual that was used to imprison Dell in the book is a bit of forbidden lore that somehow leaked out of the Iron Keep or was transferred from the Iron Keep, or someone who had been in the Iron Keep or someone connected to the Iron Keep transferred to the God, I'm terrible with names today, to the guy in the Sunless Citadel, right? So Dr. Disrespect is king. Am I boring you with my talk today? It's all good. Don't worry, it's almost over. If you feel like you're a little bit in the weeds on what's going on, I would encourage you to go back and at least watch maybe the previous 2 sessions of Iron Keep Chronicles. That will help you get caught up. Not the most previous one, but I would look at the sessions before White Plume Mountain. The very first session of White Plume Mountain and the one prior to that will help you get an idea. Is it a modified soul trap spell? I always thought it was a ritual that there was something to that specific book that put that person in there. It could be. Okay. Well, if you wanted to get on the band canon, you're well on your way. Please be respectful of our environment here. The mods are here to help ensure everyone's having a good experience. So the other thing that I want to pick up on with the book is with their kid, there's the potential that the child was also trapped inside one of these books, right? So that when they get to the end of that vault, they find out, oh, okay, well, this is how this magic, and we need to somehow solve this magic. Maybe there's something in Hargat's vault, which is the key to opening the kid. But if they want to release Dell, they also have to release their child. So that could be very interesting in terms of how those things are connected. So BSB Care makes a great point, which is we've got the leverage of the book on the table, right? Like that's incorporated into the adventure, and we can use that as a lever to pry more interesting actions forth from our characters and offer them compelling, interesting choices that might have consequences that they are going to have to weigh and consider. Griffin says Gulthias was one of the lords of the Iron Keep. Through conflict with Hargat, he was laid low. The hammer's shaft was used to stake him. This allowed Hargat to harness a large portion of his power in her collection of the other keys, and now Gulthias is just an ancient vampire and staked. So then Gulthias would be Bargad, right? A small artifact find could unlock his burial vault completely, giving the PCs the idea that artifacts are in fact keys to use later. I'm gonna have to chew over that. I like the idea that Gulthias is not. I would prefer the idea that Gulthias is not Bargad, right? That makes him feel like he's a smaller villain because they've already encountered him already, and also that he spit out like he was like Gulthias. You know, he spit that name out, and he's the one who turned me. So there's an established precedent here that the being that they encountered in Bargad's chamber was not Gulthias, him or herself. That they're separate entities. That Gulthias is somebody else, someplace else. So that's something. They do also have the stake from the Gulthias tree. Didn't they plant that? I can't remember if they're carrying it around or if they planted it. I feel like they planted it. Didn't they do that in the last session or in the 2 previous sessions? On their way up to White Plume Mountain, or maybe in the Iron Keep itself, I swear that they planted the stake from the Gulthias tree. Somebody remind me. Gingy is going to be tied to Bargat and Gulfias. I don't know that Gingy is responsible for this ritual. I think Gingy was turned by somebody connected to. Maybe Gingy was turned by Bargad long ago. That's an interesting angle to connect them. I think there's definitely a Schrodinger's clue there that says Gingy somehow is connected to the events at the Iron Keep. That's a logical path. What the possibilities there, I think we can kind of like brainstorm on some different things. They planted the 4 seeds, but they didn't. Yeah, well, and she also they planted the 4 seeds and they planted that bag, right? So I think they planted the seeds, and the weird like albino rose came up, and they pulled it out. But then or they dripped blood on it and went into the ground, and then they pulled it up someplace else. I have to go back and review that session. But yeah, they've got the stake. I swear to God that they did something with that stake. I don't know. Maybe the stake is the key, right? So if Black Razor is not the key, maybe the stake is the key that lets him into the shadow keep, if you want to call it that. All right, we got a lot of possibilities to ponder and pursue here. I need to kind of sit down and get my head squared on my shoulders here, have a little something to eat, put some thought into it, and we'll see what we come up with tomorrow. I think they're going to keep adventuring in White Plume Mountain. If they decide not to, I think there are a variety of ways to address that without them having to go all the way back to town. So the stake is the little key, while Black Razor is the mega key. I mean, it could be that you need a key to open the key, right? Like Black Razor is just this piece of dull obsidian that has a hole in the bottom of it, in the hilt, and you put the stake in there, and then it kind of like springs to life. Woo-hoo-hoo! I don't know. The problem with that is I don't know how Grayson is going to respond to that at all. I think we're really pushing the boundaries of what our lawful good paladin protector is going to stand, what he's going to tolerate before he finally just decides, I need to take matters into my own hands and purge this evil from this world, right? So that's very tricky. All right, well, I'll try and connect with Amy and talk with her about her character and where she sees this going, because I want to find a way for her to have this communion with the voices that is fun for her as a role-playing thing without it becoming an issue where it's freaking out the other characters in the party when she does it. So, yeah, Estelle Castillo says, I think the players would hesitate making a drastic move like leaving White Plume without the whole party being there. So that's the fourth part of this whole adventure that we need to think about, is what's Avril's character doing? And what, if there's a substitute, you know, how does that character get introduced for that session? Because it's probably just going to be a single session. So those are things to think about. I mean, we could take the drastic step of Avril gets sucked into the book. That's pretty hardcore. Now you need to find a way to spring her by the end of that session. So I as the DM, I better have a good idea of how to get at least one person out of that book. I'm not sure I'm there at this point. All right. Yeah, it would certainly, as BSB Care points out, it would certainly add to the real time crunch. So it's 3:20. I know we started a little late, but we're now over time, over our hour. Yes. Avril would make a delightful bird. if you pull her into the book, then when they yank her out, surely that method can be used to free Dell too. That's a good. That's definitely an implication of that scenario. But if you give them, say, it uses a finite number of consumables in order to activate, you have to have 2 flasks of powdered silver that has been blessed under the light of the harvest moon or whatever it is, and they only have 2 flasks of powdered silver. Well, until they find more, they're probably going to pull Avril out and not pull Dell out. Yeah. If she's not trapped in the book, what about her being trapped in a mirror or something that she's trapped inside? My initial response to that is we already have characters being trapped inside of objects already, that it feels too similar. It's just not different enough that she gets trapped in a mirror. And we got somebody trapped in a mirror, and somebody trapped in a book. Somebody's going to be trapped in a potion bottle, and somebody's going to be trapped on a ship inside a bottle, and then we'll have the trifecta, and the whole party will be trapped, and everybody's trapped. So it just feels a little too on the nose, or similar without being different enough. Whereas if she got sucked into the book, everybody would be like, oh, well, maybe this book is dangerous. Maybe we shouldn't just assume we can carry this around, because she gets sucked in, and then they look inside, and they turn a few more pages, and they find out, oh, there's 3 more villagers in here that we didn't know got sucked in. James V is using his programming background. First in, last out. So Avril, there's no choice but to get Avril out. Yeah, what if Tack does choose Dell over Avril? Or what if it's last in, first out? Or the book is a door to someplace special? We definitely have some opportunities here to go some different places with that door. Or with that book. And I'm glad that you all brought it back up, because it is something that I have been neglecting. And it needs to start coming into the foreground. It needs to get closer on our plot radar, as we only have probably 2 or 3 sessions left in White Plume Mountain. Maybe on Thursday we'll talk about where we're going to go next after that. I've got some different ideas. All right, so everybody, I don't know why my mic is getting so hot, but there you go. I apologize if I've been a little loud. Let's take a look at the calendar. Later this week, so tomorrow night, it's Ironkeep Chronicles. Tune in, find out what happened. Thursday at 2, I'm back with Disorganized Play. We're going to talk about what happened and where we're going from here. Thursday at 8, it's our Star Wars Edge of the Empire game with you. America's Dungeon Master, Mr. David Crennan, Never Tell Me the Odds, is on Thursday. Friday, we begin an all-new season of Wild Cards. So join DJ Jordan Caves Callerman and the brand new season of Wild Cards, which is going to start this Friday night. I'm sure he's got some weirdness on deck for you all. We'll see what happens. I'm excited for a new season of that. So that is our chat today. Thank you so much to everyone for joining in. Special thanks to all of our mods who kicked the a-holes out and keep everything running so clean and tidy. I want to thank you all for joining me. I really do appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you, talk about what our possibilities are, where we're going next, what plot threads we need to kind of like pull forward, push back, reweave, reshape, all that sort of stuff. It helps me run a much more coherent and cohesive game. So it should be fun. I'm curious who we're going to bring in for Havana's replacement. We may just run a session with the 3 players and see how they cope. Although, you know, White Plume Mountain, there's a lot of fighting in it. So being down a thief is going to be a little tricky. Now, let's think about this. What if that book that we've been talking about doesn't just have Dell and doesn't just have Avril in it, but it has another potential player character who could pop out of the book, either on purpose or on accident, and join the party. Oh, I'm finally free. That could work extremely well. I think we could also have someone RP some sort of spirit that's been entombed in White Plume Mountain, that's been bound here by Hargat Axebinder, and could take part in the adventure somehow, but maybe not have their complete memories because they've been entombed here for so long or whatever. That could be interesting as well. So I think we've got some possibilities for introducing a substitute as a one-shot. It really depends upon like who's available and who can jump in at the last minute. I didn't find out about this until this morning, so we're kind of... And Dom has been busy with Gen Con and whatnot, if you guys have been following the feed. So we're a little bit short-staffed in terms of our turnaround time here and getting somebody to fill in. But my hope is that we can get somebody in that seat. Meepo just shows up. Well, yes, Meepo. It's possible. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I really do appreciate all of your ideas, conversation, and support. It certainly has helped bring next session into focus for me. After having a long break and having a lot of different things on my mind, your help is duly appreciated. So until next time being tomorrow, let's dungeon! Oh, am I up to 175 continuous, wonderful handoffs on the saving throw calendar? I believe I am. Oh, wug it. All right, Rockstars, we will catch you tomorrow night.